decided it is decidedly a genetic flaw because Shane used the term antithesis. Got to use those big words to try to explain things. But the opposite of what we sang, let the beauty of Jesus be seen in us, is what we're talking about here. And I told the elders that, yes, I'm going to preach this, and I'm against it. And they said, great, this should be a short sermon. No. I got lots to say. One of the things that I want to point out to begin with, though, and I'm preaching to the choir, basically, because we're looking at a topic I don't believe any of us have because we're faithful Christians, but it is, I think, a good reminder that we need to use scriptures well, and we need to recognize exactly what they're saying to us in order that we can understand better how to reach out to those who have these issues. Now, one of the things that I want to start with is when you look at the whole context under one single paradigm, we're talking about something that is addictive. We're talking about something that is overwhelming, that's not easy to get out of, but that has very recognizable traits. And I've talked to guys, they talk about being a functional alcoholic. That to me is a contrast of terms and really isn't true. You may be fooling yourself or others about it, but you don't function properly when you are drunk with wine. We're to be filled with the Spirit, according to Ephesians 5:18. And so that's what we're talking about. And in this same book of wisdom, it is the case that we're not talking about alcohol as a content per se. Notice over in chapter 31, if you look in your Bibles just a few pages over, chapter 31, verse 6. And it's interesting in this text where the term in the Hebrew, shekar, is never used for anything but alcoholic beverage. But I want you to notice the purpose of the use. And that's what makes the distinction between this and the text we're going to look at. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Look, you know, we're talking about a medicine here. It's the 1 Timothy 5:23 kind of context, where Paul tells Timothy, take a little wine for your stomach's sake. Okay? There is a functional use for all kinds of products we have in this world, many of them very natural. But to use them in a way of abuse or to use them in a recreational sense, and that's what we're talking about in the context, is not authorized by God. One of the arguments I'm afraid people use, and I despise it, we have done lessons on this in the past, you'll probably remember, my making the comment that the concept or the statement, one drop drunk, is nonsensical, okay? Because NyQuil, or not NyQuil, there was another elixir that we used for our cough medicine, maybe it was NyQuil, but NyQuil had alcohol in it. We got a couple of pharmacists here, they can tell you. But there were some folks that had real bad coughs because they would take NyQuil by the bottle. And that's not what we're talking about here, okay? We're talking about a substance that people use, and there's some curiosity in my mind, particularly from my own experience, mostly in the Navy. No, wait a minute, let me rephrase that. Not my own experience that I used to be a drunk, okay? Let me rephrase that. My own experience having been in the Navy and watched some of my buddies who would come back from their binges and drinking, and here are some of the characteristics that just did giveaways that this can't be a good solution to anything. Who has woe? You know, so many, when their lives begin to go wrong, go to the bottom of the bottle for a solution. That's not where the solutions are found. As a matter of fact, without fail, it just makes problems worse. And so this is one of the characteristics of using this substance for the wrong reason. Again, who has sorrow? One of the qualities of alcohol, beverage alcohol, is that it's a depressant. You know, why would somebody, if they're having struggles in life, go to a depressant to get an answer? That's just counterproductive. Who has contentions? Now, I know this is not politically correct, but I've always thought it's just an irony to me in our culture, where we have legalized alcohol and we've made illegal marijuana. That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, what do guys who take marijuana or use marijuana recreationally normally do? Well, they kick back and they're groovy, man, and they're easy going and everything. And when you give a guy a bunch of booze, he wants to fight somebody. My theory is let's legalize marijuana and make alcohol illegal, and it will have a lot less crime, fights, beatings amongst wives and husbands. And that's, of course, being facetious, because neither one of them are acceptable to be used as a recreational drug. And both of them are just that, drugs that are being used recreational. One of the things that happens when you begin to lose those boundaries that we have, civil boundaries that we have in relationships, is when you take a substance that messes with your mental ability to be sober. That's when fights break out. Who has wounds without cause? I can remember, and it's funny, but it's not funny. But guys coming back from a night out, pie-faced, just all out of it, and they got a bump here, a scar there, and some of them an open wound on occasion, and it's like, well, what happened there? They had no clue what happened. And it's because, they weren't in their right mind. Who has redness of eyes? It's even observable. This is something that is obvious when it happens. All of these kinds of things that we look at there are characteristics of those who linger long at the wine and those who go in search of mixed wine. You're talking about people who are searching out, seeking out this substance, not because there is a necessity for it, like give strong drink to a dying man. There's an anesthetic value to that causes the pain to go away. It's different taking some drug or some substance of some kind in order to mediate the pain in some way. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just getting this way, pie-faced, because that's what we want to do, and we feel good doing it. And by the way, let's not lie to ourselves. That's what happens. People feel good, or at least they think they do, when they're doing this. Sin is so attractive. In fact, that's the next phrase here that makes it look like, if we were paying attention, we would see this coming. Don't look at the wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup and swirls around smoothly. Tell me what sin Satan has ever set before us that doesn't look good. When Hebrew writer talks about the pleasures of sin for a season, we're fooling ourselves to claim it's not fun to sin. I know that doesn't sound good coming from a pulpit, but it's the truth. Sin is intended to be fun. It's engineered to be fun. Satan is no fool. He is evil to the nth degree, but he's not stupid. He's not going to present something before you that's going to tear your life to pieces, which is what beverage alcohol does when it's taken socially or recreationally. It has torn up families left and right. It has left dead and all kinds of carnage on our highways. You could go on with the multiple ailments and illnesses of things that happen when people resort to beverage alcohol when it's not a medicine. But it looks good, it tastes, well, I'm not sure that I can convince everybody it tastes good. I've heard so many people talk about how liquor tastes horrible or beer tastes horrible, and so I might not be able to convince them of that. But if it is the case that it tastes so bad, why do so many people drink it? Why is it so popular? At last, it bites like a serpent, stings like a viper. And that is the culmination of a constant imbibing of this social or recreational beverage. It ends up hurting you. It always does. And the problem is, it's not just hurting you. It hurts, the collateral damage is unbelievable. It hurts others when you do this. And so, therefore, it tells us your eyes, and there's some more characteristics of it, like was talked about before. Your eyes will see strange things. I've seen guys come back on the ship, and it's amazing what they think is going on. They'll utter perverse things. And by the way, that term there in Hebrew, perverse, is something that goes way beyond just saying something rude or crude. It's perverse. It's ugly. It's things that God would call an abomination. And so that's what you become when you take this stuff in. It changes you from just, you can't even be neutral under the influence of this alcohol. You're worse than neutral. And so, yes, you'll be one who lies down in the midst of the sea. You can imagine why I relate to this verse. Having been in the Navy, I know what it's like to be on the ocean. I know what it's like to hit waves that rock the ship so violently that you're going side to side on occasion, and you can walk on the walls and walk back down the floor and walk on the other side of the wall because the ship is tipping and leaning so much. That's what goes on because your mind is poisoned, and that's what this stuff is. Finally heard a YouTube the other day where somebody finally admitted, and he said it like, oh, we all know this, which is kind of ironic, But his comment was, and he's a doctor, a medical doctor, he said, we all know alcohol is a poison. It was like an epiphany. And I'm going, that's what the Bible's been saying forever. It's a poison. It's not good for you. The only reason you would take many of the medicines that we have today is because it does some kind of damage to your body to mitigate pain. And that's what this is intended for, not the recreational use of it. The result, of course, is you're so numb, you don't even feel the abuse that you are putting your body through. And that's one of the things about sin. Really, you can hurt others, and you do when you sin, but the real damage is done to yourself. I'm convinced a lot of guys do this. They feel so poorly about themselves. And I saw it many times where guys would feel terrible about something they'd done, something they'd said. And they feel so poorly about it, they feel like they need to be abused or punished, and that's why they would drink. And they would drink to excess, and sure enough, they would damage themselves. The addiction portion of it is what gets missed so often, and I've watched guys go through the shudders and shakes trying to get off of alcohol addiction. I do take issue with the characterization that it's given in our culture as though it is a disease. Diseases are things we catch or we end up getting exposed to. It's not something normally that we go in and intentionally try to inflict upon our own self. Alcoholism, I don't believe, really can be categorized as a disease. It is a sin of choice that gets out of hand. And the way I understand it, and this is what happens when you get to this point, the addiction is so strong that after all of the abuse, after all of these things that you have that you can recognize as totally wrong, you go back to it because it's an addiction. You're addicted to it. And when you do that, it says here, you wake and I'll seek another drink. I've seen guys go through the shakes and shudders trying to get off this stuff on their own. This reminds me of Galatians 6:1, where we have someone, and it's not talking specifically about the context we're in tonight, but you know, when somebody is overtaken in a fault, you can get to a point sometimes by your own willful choices, doing things that are wrong, to become so confused or so dependent that you can't get out of it by yourself. And that's where those of us who are spiritual need to step up and help somebody. The fancy term these days, they call it an intervention. I think it's just being a Christian to help each other out when you get into these kinds of circumstances. But there are times that people get into these kinds of habits, these kinds of practices, where they can't get out by themselves. We that are spiritual ought to reach out to them and help them out of what they can't get out of by themselves. It doesn't do a lot of good to tell somebody that is actually addicted, you need to quit that. By and large, they know that. It's just to a point where they're really not able to do it on their own. There are sins that can overcome you, overtake you, get you to a point you can't get it out by yourself. We need each other to help each other get out of these problems. And so the reminder here, I think it's ironic, this falls in the wisdom literature, in Proverbs, a book about wisdom. What this is look at what goes on when you use something improperly, and it's a generic, over the overarching paradigm. Anything goes for that. Anything God has put in nature, anything God has made, when He finished making everything, He said everything's good. All we needed was for man to mess it up, and that's what He did, beginning with the tree of life. It was taken away from him because he ate a forbidden fruit. He was not supposed to eat. That was something that was off limits. He could not use that in an appropriate way. Okay, anytime we change what God has intended for what He's created, it's wrong, it'll hurt us, it can become addictive, and we need to help those who are addicted by these things out of it. This really didn't apply to everybody here, but that's a reminder that we can be overcome with a lot of different things. If we'll be honest with ourselves, it's kind of hard to get out of by ourselves. If you need help of any kind, we always offer an invitation for that reason. We want to help. If you've got some issue that you're dealing with, not alcoholism, I realize that's not the case here with this group tonight. But if you need help of any kind, go ahead and admit the fact that, yeah, I need help. And try to get some help from somebody that you know and can trust and love. And you know, as a Christian brother or sister, they're going to look for your best, and they're going to try to do what they can to help you get out. If you need to respond in any way, we invite you to the songs